Welcome to the channel. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Today we will be reviewing the final watch which I received from the HHX store, the store which bought us the two Anyton watches which I have already reviewed. Both were fantastic pieces with high-end specifications and finishing. Both were priced at a fairly reasonable price. In fact, the Santos homage in the summer sales was quite a bargain, going as low as £170. But now, of course, the sales have ended. Even though you do have some supplementary sales going on, it is Aliexpress after all. So this means that the watch I'm going to show you today is priced at £280, which is a decent chunk of money to be spending on a watch from Aliexpress. Just for reference, in the sales, this was £235 without any coupons applied. So the watch we're looking at today is the Rokatie S1077. We know what it's homaging, a very popular high-end watch design, and it's a design which is quite popular amongst the enthusiasts. Now, £280, granted, is quite a bit of money for a watch from AliExpress, but objectively, I'd say the watch is also spec'd out right for the price. The full specifications will be on screen, but just to call out some things, like you get sapphire not only on the main face crystal, you also get sapphire on the exhibition caseback. Which brings me on to the movement used. This is the Miyota 9015, which features hack and wind capabilities, also has a higher beat rate at 4 Hz, and in my own experience, it's very reliable and accurate, and I would compare this directly with the Sellita SW200. These are solid movements. You can additionally see that they have used a custom rotor, which obviously requires additional work, and they've added further detailing to the said rotor. So I'd say just off the specifications, £280 is not a bad price for what it is, but on sale at £235 is a bit of a bargain price. Now this watch comes in 3 different colours. You've got a dark blue, which I've got in hand, a white, and also the standard black. So let's get down to business and let me give you my thoughts on this watch. The first thing, it's a name. Yes, it is a strange name, no doubt, and it feels quite odd to say in comparison to, say, Anyton. So that's going to be the first hurdle, and if you are okay with that, the rest of the watch is actually great. Now that I'm looking at the third model from this particular store, I do see a consistency in what they do offer. Not only with specifications, but the level of finishing is far above what you would expect. This is no different. The finishing is extremely good. The details are immaculate. With this particular case, you see the use of coarse linear brushing on the A-face, which emphasizes that main case. The crisp lines between that and the large mirror polished bevel that you get around that bezel. The details are immaculate. As I said, the finishing, what you'll find is things like the grain, when you do look a bit close in detail, are very consistent, showing machine polishing. And just look at the shape of the bezel with those sort of subtle facets that you get, you know, being this iconic case it is, it's just gleaming. Everything is very crisply done. Now, when you look just closer at the bezel, you'll see it actually sits on a rubber gasket, which is due to the design. And you've also got these symmetrical crown guards with a combination of fine satin brushing and polished centerpieces, which I believe they can be disassembled, as you've got screws in the bottoms and the tops. But just take a closer look. All that finishing, the smaller details, the polished edges, the polished centers. Yeah, everything is done to a very high degree, and that is undeniable. Then the actual case also features very fine satin brushing. You don't see too much of it because of the way the bezel sits on there. And then along the outer edge of those lugs, you've got a fine polished bevel edge, which again, it does have that crisp transition line between the types of finishing. Now this then carries onto the sides of the watch, just past the crown guards. You then see that soft satin brushing once again. Now I'm just going to take a bit of time, slow it down a little, just so you can see the level of detail that I'm seeing in hand. And I know it doesn't translate across on camera, but in hand, you know, under your fingertips, when you do feel watches with this fine level of polishing, and the different types, looking at the coarse grain here, then you've got obviously the softer grain just below that, and then you've got the satin grain on the side, and then all these little polished edges and bevels. It is really looking at a watch in, you know, extreme high definition. Now, if you take a closer look at the underside of the case, you'll also find those polished edges that you find on the lugs. They also extend to the underside of the case. And again, this is something which is a high level of finishing, high level of detail, and you're not going to find this on your typical, usual watches that you see. So with the watches available on HHX Store, they don't seem to skimp on finishing, and they remain true to the watches they're homaging. Finishing is the most important aspect in my opinion, because if you're going to homage a high-end watch, then the finishing needs to be somewhat similar or as nice. Now here is when we move on to that H-Link integrated bracelet, which has a dramatic taper from the initial first link. Now here you'll notice that soft linear satinized brushing is consistent throughout, and it does make the bracelet look really high end. The edges are also double beveled, the top edge being polished to highlight the edges of the bracelet, but the bottom end is brushed, but the bevels are still present. Now these bevels on the underside of the bracelet are really going to help wrist comfort. The sides and undersides of that bracelet are all fully brushed, and those center links, they're raised slightly, they're like 3D, mirror polished and crafted beautifully. They are obviously fingerprint magnets, and you will pick up plenty of micro scratches as I have done here. But the execution is definitely there and at a very high level. Function wise, the bracelet uses that thick butterfly clasp, and the precision is again very high end. Same mechanism as the Eniton, that Santos homage that we looked at. Those little ridges on the ends of the clasp fit tightly into those center pieces. Now the clasp, while it's not to everyone's taste, it is a high quality of butterfly clasp, which means that it is just less flimsy. They do, however, on the bracelet use a pin and collar system, which is awkward, but the collars are large, so not as fiddly. Now moving on to the crown, that screw down thread is very smooth, and you've actually got decent grip on a small crown. As you can see, I can operate it with my gloves on. Now the least impressive or least interesting part of the watch is obviously the dial. It's the most basic thing on the watches. Now luckily enough, on the Eniton Santos homage, I found those polished batons to look quite impressive, but this is quite drab. Color is quite dark on the blue, and yeah, it's not going to do too well against the highly finished case. Dial features those deep cut horizontal lines, the printed minute track, and features a black date wheel. The markers are applied with basic polished frame. The handset is also fully polished with a chamfer in the center, which will help them to stand out. Now, I get that it's that quiet luxury effect, a low profile dial, but the rest of the watch definitely stands out. And the lume on this dial is actually quite poor, in all honesty. It's also C3. Now, this being homage to a high-end Swiss watch, they should have used BGW9 and added just a few more layers. The hands are significantly lesser than the dial hour markers, so here I would expect more layers and just that consistency that we see across the watch case, especially at the price point this watch does sit at. So perhaps I'd go with the black dial, as I think it'd look a bit better and not so drab with that blue dial. Now on wrist, I've got to go through dimensions here because it's an awkward case. So technically it's a 38mm case, but edge to edge with those symmetrical crown guards, it goes up to 43mm, which should sit better on a lot more wrists. The thickness is incredible. It is just 9.5mm thanks to that Miyota, and the lug to lug is 44.5, but goes out to 56mm due to those integrated links, which themselves start at 25.5 and then taper down to 17mm, which is very drastic. All this means is that it's going to fit a large range of wrists. It does fit very snugly on my 6.5-inch wrist, and I had to remove 2 links either end, and there still is room to remove another 3 links in total. And I have to say, it looks great on wrist. That case and bracelet really stand out. It's very comfortable, and it does obviously have that high-end presence. The dial, yeah, it's a little bit of a letdown. The color choice is very important that you go for. But that finishing, all those polished details across the satin brushing, it feels great on wrist. It looks great from a distance as well, and obviously up close. So overall, I'd say I love the consistency being offered by the store. It gives really good confidence when you're going to look at the other designs or the watches. However, they are very restricted by the designs in ways that they won't improve certain things, like the dials, but specifications are awesome. The sapphire sandwich, the fit, form and function, and finally the finishing is way above board. So I still remain impressed at the details and finishing they have. Now finally, £280 I want a way more interesting dial, or just go for the black. Also, I'd say wait for the sales to save whatever you can, but still it's a great watch on offer. So that's it from me today. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.